Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to GarbAugust. This is a month-long BookTube event created by Ollie at Criminali. I'm one of the co-hosts of the event, and it is designed, as the title suggests, to celebrate trash. It's designed to read garbage all month long in August. And as a lifelong fan of garbage, I jumped on the chance, and I have been reading a ton of garbage this month, more than I usually do. As I mentioned yesterday, reading garbage is an involuntary part of a lot of the reading that I do. I read new releases and I review a lot of them, and a lot of them are garbage. The difference here is that with GarbAugust, we are largely looking at books whose classification as garbage won't raise any eyebrows. Right? Sean D. Standfast just did a video recently on his channel about detested authors that he just can't stand. And in the course of that video, when he mentions scandalously the Bronte sisters, he mentions Jane Austen. In the course of that video, he mentions that he can't stand these authors, but he also mentions the reasons why. And in quite a few of those cases, he is familiar with their entire works and can list his critical reasons why he thinks they're trash. I think we should be wary of instantly dismissing that just because centuries of usage have called them classics. Centuries of usage can be wrong. I think he is wrong, nevertheless, but this event has it has prompted me to do a lot of deeper thinking about what trash is and why it is and what it's like to read it. But we haven't largely ventured into those kinds of heretical, canonical grounds in GarbAugust. Some names that come up in Sean's video, I consider to be garbage. But I wouldn't mention them for GarbAugust because I know there's a huge amount of disagreement, and that probably, considering that 80 million Frenchmen can't be wrong, I might be wrong. Now, for GarbAugust, we have mainly concentrated on books that we know are garbage. And how do you know? Well, I've done a few theoretical videos about how you can spot garbage, and some of the telltale signs and also some of the deeper thematic indications. But sometimes it's easy. I won't say judging a book by its cover or its title, but sometimes it's fairly easy to tell. If you are a writer, or even that writer's friends and editors, and you have written something that's genuinely good, you're going to resist calling it Bimbos from Dimension 9. You're going to resist calling it that. I know you could say, well, what difference does it make what you call it, right? That's just a title, a rose by any other name. But you're going to resist doing that because you're going to know what that says to various readers. So the question is only, if you read a book with a title like that, what kind of trash is it? The question won't really be, is it trash? The question will be, what kind of trash is it? Unless it's trying really hard. And I don't know. As I've mentioned, I have not had any live discussions with my co-hosts on GarbAugust, so we have not hashed out whether or not a bad novel that tries to be good and fails is a better kind of trash or a worse kind of trash. I don't know, but I need to know because of the book that I've read for today's garbage pile. And that it is by Kerry Neitz, and it is Amish Vampires in Space. Which quite unknowingly, I'm sure that the author is very young. I'm sure that the author does not remember the Muppet Show. And a running gag on one of my favorite skits on the Muppet Show was pigs in space. The idea being that if you add "in space" to the title of a book, you automatically render it trash. This is the story of Jebediah Miller, who is Amish in the future. This takes place in the future on the planet Alabaster, which has an Amish stronghold there. They have emigrated there. The planet has been minimally terraformed to suit their minimal low technology needs. When they, by confluence of events, they decide, a group of them decide to leave the planet. They get on a freighter, a starship, leaving the planet, but something is on board with them. An infection of some kind. I bet you can guess what kind. That starts changing people. And this immediately, once this becomes known, this threat, it immediately pits Jebediah and a few of his friends and the ship's captain and some of the ship's crew against this threat. And I think, I have mentioned when it comes to garbage that it helps a lot. In fact, it seals the deal. If the author of garbage is in on the joke, if they know that what they're writing is garbage and they're just having fun with it, then you can have fun with it without a single twinge of conscience. I would maintain that even if they aren't in on the joke, you probably don't need a single twinge of conscience. Although, if they're not in on the joke, the book probably isn't worth your time. And I know some of you out there who don't have any truck with trash are going to say, well, trash is never worth your time. It is. It can be. Absolutely, it can be. But in this case, it didn't take more than 50 pages into this thing for me to start asking a couple of times out loud, wait a minute, are you serious or are you not? How can you be serious writing a novel called Amish Vampires in Space? How can you be serious about this? You can't be, right? You're being po-faced. The reason I thought that is because a lot more texture goes into this book than an idea like this would warrant. And also, another telltale that maybe the author takes it seriously is that the Amish are not mocked in the book, when you would kind of expect that they would be. They admittedly make easy targets for mockery in our century or the century in which this book is set. But they aren't mocked. There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on here in terms of Christianity. I'm not really sure. That was one of the only elements in this book where I got the distinct feeling that I was coming into a party where I wasn't reading the subtitles. Is this author, I don't know anything about this author. I think this book came out almost a decade ago. Is this author known for being a Christian novelist? Has he become known for that? I don't know. I didn't get the impression that this was his first novel. This makes no first novel, debut novel mistakes. The typical ones mistakes that a debut novel makes announce themselves a mile off, and this one doesn't do that. So I have a feeling that by the time the author wrote this book, he was practiced. I think it's a he, or was practiced in the art of novel-length storytelling. The only first novel problem that I saw here is that it's way too long. It's 400 pages long, or maybe a little more than that, and there's no more than a 200-page book in here. But there's a lot of religious palaver in here. Not just the Amish, but there's a character who is a rather strident, oddly strident, considering the emergency situation that she's in. Rather oddly strident kind of holier-than-thou, Bible Belt, fundamentalist, generic pop brand Christian that they tend to be the most wonderful people in the world, except on Sundays. And I didn't understand what that was doing in here. That's a thread that runs a lot through this book. It's not missable. So maybe that is one element of this book where that might have been a little bit explained, wouldn't have been exonerated, because there isn't any exoneration here. I am a practiced reader. If I come to your book knowing nothing about you, not even your gender, and knowing nothing about whether or not you're a religious author, and I come out of your book with nagging, distracting questions about that have nothing to do with your plot, you have failed. At least in that aspect. I must never, and you must never, ever say that you need a trip to Wikipedia in order to better understand a book. A book is a self-contained thing. Long after Wikipedia has vanished from the earth, it will still be possible to find a copy of Amish Vampires in Space and read it. So it's a time capsule on its own, and it has all of the obligations incumbent on that. And it fails in a few ways there. Pacing is a little off. The world building is a little weird, but there's a huge amount of earnest energy that goes into this thing. It wasn't at all what I thought. I thought it was going to be, every brief chapter in a 130-page book setting up a punchline. And that hardly ever happens in here. I almost want to say, I don't know anything about this book, aside from what I read, but I don't know anything about its posthumous reception history among readers. I don't know, in other words, if it's a cult favorite. But it seemed earnest, which is weird. And you would think sight unseen deadly for a book called Amish Vampires in Space. That the one thing it couldn't be is earnest. That would ruin everything. And I won't say that it does. This was entertaining to read. I won't say that that ruins everything. But it does take an element of the atmosphere out. It's like it's like that slightly tinny feeling you have when you go to a costume party at someone's house and there's that one person who just thinks costume parties are lame. So it's not that they skip the party, it's that they show up without a costume. That kind of ruins the illusion for everybody. You wish they hadn't shown up. And the earnestness of the author kind of sort of does that for this book. If the author is earnest, I think the author probably was at least partly earnest about telling an actual science fiction story that is in part the classic, architecture of the monster on board a ship. If the author was at least partly in earnest about telling a story like that, then this becomes almost inexcusable. Then all of a sudden the spell is broken and I can notice that the writing is really bad. The imagery is really tired or non-existent. The world building is slipshod. The ending, let's not even talk about the ending. It's the end. That's just basically it. It's going along just fine and you're thinking about what the long-term ramifications are and then it stops. I don't imagine that there's anyone here, whether they're a fan of Christian literature or Amish literature or science fiction, who would be satisfied by the ending of this thing. And it certainly didn't leave me... I mean, there are elements in here. There's a shady organization that's behind a couple of the key plot points in the second half of the book that's never really explained and that's not dealt with. It's still around. It's still extant and very powerful at the end of the book. And there are a couple of other things, too. The relationships between a couple of the main pairs of characters are not resolved at the end of the book. They're sort of in process. So it could be that this is the first book in a series. There might be more Amish Vampires in Space. But that doesn't matter either, right? That doesn't give the author a free pass. I would be okay if there were continuable elements at the end of this book, obviously. I would be okay with that, because that happens all the time in science fiction and fantasy books, that there are continuable elements, or that the thing is explicitly continued with to be continued. I wouldn't mind that, except that this doesn't, even with those things, this doesn't come to any kind of ending on its own. And I hold that against the author. In other words, this is a mystery to me. It's not a mystery to me as to whether or not it belongs in GarbAugust's. This is very much trash. The title is, in fact, accurate. But what kind of trash is it? I honestly don't think the author intends this to be trash. And that changes things. That's like the one guy at the Halloween party who shows up, plastic red cup in hand, small talk at the ready, only he's not wearing a costume. That kind of spoils things. I don't know. I mean, this author is not talented, so I don't know that I would ever read another book by him or her. but I couldn't resist a novel called Amish Vampires in Space. I couldn't do it. So that was my GarbAugust's trash pile for today. Was a crew of well-meaning Amish people who are one by one being stalked and picked off by something that seems undead. That isn't Jesus. That was another element that confused me about this whole thing. And it's confused me outside of this book a lot. With Christians that I've met, various Christians that I've met. I've lost count of how many Bible Belt, revival tent Christians I have met in my life who don't think Catholics are Christian. And I gather that there are a whole bunch of those kinds of Christians who don't think that Mormons are Christian. They don't think that the Amish are Christian. And I never understand that. I've never understood sectarian squabbles going back all the way to the beginning of Christianity. I've never understood that at all. I've been far more comfortable killing Germans in the forest for the Romans. I never understood these things at all. If you worship Jesus as a god, then you're a Christian. I don't know. I should think that would go without saying. If you worship instead a huckster like Joseph Smith or L. Ron Hubbard, if they're your Messiah, okay, fine, then you're not a Christian. But if you worship Jesus, you're a Christian. So I really didn't know what all the squabbling was about in certain parts of this book. And it wouldn't matter anyway, because every time the squabbling came up, I wanted to say, don't you have more important things to be thinking about here? But anyway, it was fascinating. I'm not sure, because I'm not sure of the author's intention, I'm not 100% sure that this is completely guilty pleasure territory. So, but it was interesting. So that is my my garbage pile for today. We'll see what tonight brings. Thank you.